Welcome back to Angela's Craft Room. I'm just going to take you through some of the techniques that I've used to make this tri-fold shutter card. I'm not going to show you how to do the folds and cuts on the tri-fold shutter card in this tutorial, but I will do it in a later tutorial. Today I mainly want to go through what techniques I've used in the sponging, and I've used the blender pen, Stampin' Up blender pen to colour my turtle. Then I've cut him out and I've put him on dimensionals. I've had lots of requests from ladies to let them know how I actually did all this technique and followed it through more like a scene. Now to do this card, I've actually used 3 stamp sets, which I'll just show you quickly. I've used From Land to Sea, By the Tide, and also the gorgeous Grunge. So we'll get started. Now, even though I did that on a tri-fold shutter card, just to show you the techniques of the scene that I did, I'm just going to do it on a square piece of shimmery white cardstock. I have just started doing the brown at the bottom. So to do that, the first colour I'm going to use is Chocolate Chip. That's down the bottom here. Now, just as I always say, just less is better, because you can always add more colour but you can't take it off. So I always damp it onto my grid paper and I just start, and I'm just hardly touching that. You know, you just got to be very patient if you're going to do this sponging technique. And then when I haven't got that much brown on the sponge left, I'm just going up the sides a little bit. I'm not going to go right up to the top. I'm just going to go halfway up. So I need to do all the sponging first, and then we'll get into the stamping. There's a couple of different tricks to the stamping, and you can always add more. Like, I just want it to be quite brown at the bottom, because this is like at the bottom of the ocean. And then I'm just going to add a bit of brown up here. So I'll just set that aside. Now I'm going to bring in some Marina mist. I'll just turn that round. So just as you can see, when you first start, it is just very light. You can hardly see it coming on to the cardstock. But as you apply more colour, but it's just with sponging, it has to be done very slowly. It's a slow technique to get that nice smooth finish. I get asked all the time, how do I get that smooth finish? You just got to be very light with your hand and just slow. And you can see that blue coming in. And you've got to remember at the end that, you know, this is all going to be stamped over. I know you most probably can see there's a couple of brown spots there, but that doesn't matter because it's going to get sponged over. So we'll go in from this side this time, and just when you haven't got that much blue left on your sponge, just go down into the brown, because we want all the colours to slowly blend into each other. We don't want to see any lines, like direct lines from where the blue starts. So I'm just going to put the 4 main colours on first, and then I'll decide if I want to put a bit more colour to make it more of a depth colour. Because just remember, the brown is like the rocks at the bottom of the sea, and then we're just starting to bring in some blue, which is the Marina mist. Now, if you don't know, when you buy the Stampin' Up sponges from Stampin' Up, you'll get one big sponge and you just cut it into quarters. That's a quarter. And you just rinse them out when you've finished all your sponging and let them to dry, and they'll be ready to use tomorrow again. So let's go up a bit. So now I'm going to just set that aside and bring in some Pear Pizzazz. So we're just working up, going close. This will be a light colour. This is more like bit of a green. So we've gone like into blue, come from blue, and now we're bringing in the greenish colour that you see in the ocean. It's a lot more work doing this on a trifold shutter card, because you know you've got all the panels and you want the card to look like it's continually going on like into a scene. So I thought I just wanted, because I'd had so many requests about this particular card and how I achieved it and what stamp sets I used, I just thought I'd do this tutorial for you. And I'm working a lot faster than I normally would when I'm sponging. I might just bring the blue back in. Just feel like I need a bit more blue. So we're getting there. You can bring the blue up into the Pear Pizzazz so it all blends in nicely. Now, like right at the top, I'm just going to use some Daffodil Delight, which is a very light colour. Oh, not so much light, but just always sponge a little bit off on your grid paper first. And now I'm just going to put this across the top and bringing it down into the green, because this is the surface of the water, and I'll have the turtles going up towards the top. Now I just want to get some, just bring in It's a bit of a fiddle with it, but it's just until you get the look that you want. I just noticed there's a bit of a blob of a yellow there, so I'm just bringing in a bit more Pear Pizzazz, which is the green. So we can just blend the green in with the yellow, which is the Daffodil Delight. And you can use different colours. These are just the colours I chose for that card, so I thought I'd keep the same colours. But these stamp sets are really good, like for mail cards too. Just bringing a bit more Pear Pizzazz in. And Pear Pizzazz is a very light colour, so I find I've got to do that very softly, but so it doesn't. Now I'll just get a bit more Daffodil Delight. I've done that a bit too hard, so I'm going to have to try and blend that in a bit now. I need to get a bit harder with it. Pear Pizzazz. And as you can see with the sponging, especially quite a large area that this is a bit more of a challenge. Just bring in a bit, oops, sorry about that, a bit more Pear Pizzazz. I mean a bit more Marina Mist. Blue and the brown. I'm getting to the point that I'm quite happy with that. Just bringing the blue up a bit further. And as you can see, it is a slow process, so you can imagine how long it took me to do all the panels on the trifold shutter card. If you're going to do it on a trifold shutter card, I would lay the panels out and decide and just sponge all the panels first. And also I always say I always sponge on shimmery white cardstock, because it's just a lot smoother. At the end of the day, it just seems to smooth. I don't know if it's because it's got that bit of glitter through the cardstock. I know it's a bit more expensive than the normal white one, but I think just bring in a bit more chocolate chip just down the bottom. And you can see that I get a lot more on my grid paper than I do on my actual card sometimes where I'm sponging. But I will come back in another video and just show you how, give you the layout of the trifold shutter card for those that are interested. But most ladies wanted to see how I actually did the sponging. So that brown I'm really happy with. Now I just want to do a bit more blue. So do the main blue up here, and then I'm going to take it back down to the chocolate chip. And let it go into that area as well, so it's blending into the chocolate chip as well. So the brown down the bottom and the blue starting to come together for me. I'm quite happy with that, because what you've got to remember is we're going to be stamping on all this as well. So I'm sorry how long this video is going to go for, but I really wanted to show you, seeing I had so many requests on how I did get this effect. I think it's important that you see how long it does, and I do how long it takes me, but I also, you can bring a bit of that blue up into the Pear Pizzazz and to the Daffodil Delight, because that's going to change that into a more greener. And when you're doing panels like I did on the trifold shutter card, it is a lot harder to, you're never going to get all the panels the same sponge. I'm just putting a little bit of Pear Pizzazz up the top there on top of the Daffodil Delight. I think I'm going to have to start stamping soon, because I'm just... Okay, so we'll move the inks. So just refreshing you on that. The bottom I've done in chocolate chip, and then I've used Marina Mist, and then I've used some Pear Pizzazz, and at the very top I've used Daffodil Delight, and I've gone back over there just till I'm happy with how it's blended all in together. So I just got to turn that round. Now we're just going to use some Cajun Craze ink stamp, ink pad. It's like a reddish, and first one I'm going to use is the Pear, is the By the Tide, and I'm going to use the Seaweed out of that stamp set. Now when I'm doing this, I apply my ink like this, and then you're going to get good coverage. Now I have no plan, actually. I should have actually done the Gorgeous Grunge first. With the Gorgeous Grunge, I'm just going to use this stamp setup, this stamp up here from the Gorgeous Grunge, and I just need to grab an acrylic block, and what it's going to just give a pebble look. So I'm just going to use the chocolate chip. Now I'm just going to stamp it off a bit. I'm just going to add some texture there. So you can see where I said how we had a couple of lines here with our sponging. Once you start stamping, that's not going to matter. So I'm stamping on the pad, and then I'm stamping off on the grid paper, and then I'm just stamping onto my cardstock. So then you've got that effect at the bottom, which is like your pebbles. Okay, like that. Then we're going to, that was the gorgeous grunge stamp set. Now we're going to move to By the Tide. And I've stamped that up a bit, but it's been sitting there for a couple of minutes. So I'm going to stamp off first. And I'm going to stamp onto there. That's with the Cajun Craze. So I'm stamping on the Cajun Craze, but because it's a really vibrant red, I'm going to stamp off on my grid paper. And just pop that across there like that. And I might even put just a little bit on the edge there. So we're getting that sort of effect. So we've got the coral happening now. So now I might just stamp off and just bring the seaweed up that side. And I've just, without restamping, I've just stamped a bit more seaweed up there. And then from By the Tide, I'm going to use this little seahorse. Now how I'm going to do that is grab a little acrylic block, stick him on there. And I'm going to use the chocolate chip. Now I'm fully stamping him into there. So I've stamped him up really well, but then I'm going to stamp him off, and then I'm going to go straight onto the seaweed because it's going to give the illusion that he's behind the seaweed, because we've stamped in to the chocolate chip, then we've stamped off. So I hope you can see that. So it just gives the illusion that the seahorse is actually behind the seaweed because we've stamped off. So I'm just going to stamp them. Stamping in first and then stamping him off, and then stamping it in there. So I'm just doing it, I'm not really thinking what I'm doing at this point, because you can always add at a later stage. And then now we want to add some turtles. So your turtle you would get from your stamp set From Land to Sea. And what I do is, I've stamped one previously. So you just get your blending pen, and just going to show you a different technique now how we colour him. So we've just stamped him with Stays On Jet Black ink, and we're using the Stampin' Up blender pen, and and we've already stamped the turtle in Stays On Jet Black. And now what we're going to do, I'm going to use chocolate chip and I'm going to use Pear Pizzazz. So I'm just going to tip into you can see me just tipping into that. And when you're using the blender pen, it's very light strokes, like you're hardly touching your paper. Where people get frustrated is they go over and over it as if they're colouring in. You're not colouring in, you're just adding the colour, and you just do it in a couple of spots, and you can see as the colour gets lighter, it's going to you just keep going till, because as with sponging you can always add a bit more colour. But you can see that I'm not going over the same colour. Now I'm just going to go around his neck section, because the artist with this stamp has done all the hard work for us. You've got your lines where it should be, the shading should be. Now with these sorts of stamps, what I like to do is just get colour onto your turtle first, because then you can always go back over and make shade, put a bit more depth on the shaded areas. Like when I mean the shaded areas, the artist has put lines on the stamp, and so that helps you to see where the shade needs to go. So you can see I'm hardly touching it, so I'll just quickly go down there. It's a turtle, and then just under his belly there we just need to add a little brown, so he's got something there. Don't want him to be white. So we're just bringing him down like that. And most of this where I'm doing now has got so much detail done by the artist, you only really need a light colour. So I'm just, whatever's left on my brush with the chocolate chip, I'm just getting rid of it on there. Then just this bottom section, I've just put chocolate chip around there. Just get some colour down there, and you can see that I'm moving quite quickly but very lightly, so that there is some colour on all that bottom part of his shell around there. Now I want to make sure that that's completely off before I go into my Pear Pizzazz. I'm starting at the top of the shell, just adding some Pear Pizzazz. You might want your turtle to be a completely different colour. But we're going to add some Wink of Stella, the clear one, at the end, just to give him a little bit of glitter. So I just want to get a bit of green over his whole shell before I start adding more of the shaded areas. So this top piece along here I'm just going to leave. Now I'm going back into the Pear Pizzazz, and where the artist has put the lines down here, that is your shading area. So you would want to put a bit more Pear Pizzazz, or whatever colour you're using. If you're ever not sure what colour to use, you can always Google a turtle or a bird. The other day I googled a kingfisher bird, and that gave me some guidance to where what colours I could use. So that's how I use the blender pen. Then I would just use a bit of Wink of Stella, and I would just put a bit of it just on the lower body there, where the artist has got those lines. Could put a little bit up on his fin, and don't be too fussy, because what I did with, up to you, what I do is I cut these out and then apply them to my card, and I have previously done two to save a little bit of time for you. So then we're just going to grab some dimensionals. Now I'll have one there. I have cut it. So I'm going to have one just above the seahorses, and they're just swimming up to the surface. And even quickly just cut out this second one. I think I should have had 3 ready to go for you, but I did want to colour one with the blending pen so you can see. And so you can see if you go outside the edge a bit, it's not going to really matter that much. Because you're going to cut him out at nab dimensional, so if you have gone outside the lines a little bit, it's not going to really hurt. But I hope you'll give it a go. This is all, so we've used 3 stamp sets, all on the one card. I'll give you the measurements of the card I've used, because I've done this on a square card. So just round his black flipper, and I just try and keep as close to the edge of where I've added colour. That, just trim off his little flipper there. Yeah, I think as this card is a bit bigger, I think I'm going to need 3, and after I've cut that out I most probably won't use 3 now. I definitely want him up there, and I definitely want one there. What I might do is just bring in a bit more seaweed. I was going to put a jellyfish in there, but I don't think I will. I'll just use a bit more seaweed with the Cajun Craze, because I did it on the trifold shutter card. It was a lot smaller. Just bring a bit of seaweed in the side there. And what you can do, just grab a scrap of paper and pop it over there, and stamp off just a way that you can seaweed up there. That's better. So it's not so much of a dark area. And then you could put a couple of more seahorses in there. So they're going to be behind the seaweed because we're stamping them full, and then we're just, and then right out, put one there. So we'll get some dimensionals happening on the back of these guys. You can always cut your dimensionals in half, especially for the fins. You don't want your dimensionals showing out. And I'm sorry that the tutorial's gone so long, but the main part of this tutorial is the sponging technique, and I normally wouldn't do it that quickly, but hopefully it's been helpful for you. Just remember with your dimensionals, you can always use these side bits as well. Like a lot of people throw them away, but they come in really handy for really thin areas. And I'm going to put another one in there. I do like this scene on the trifold shutter card better. It was a lot of work, but I just prefer the scene. Look, I think it was a lot nicer on the trifold shutter card, but I'll come back. I know a lot of you know how to do trifold shutter cards, but there are some ladies that still don't know. So they've been down for a feed and they're just on their way back up to the top. And I just need a little bit of dimensional, which I didn't put it under this little fellow's head. That's a lot better sitting there. So we'll just move the ink pads out the way, scissors out the way, all my mess out the way. You can see that I just don't know how I'd go without grid paper. I just love the grid paper. Now, the card I've used, I've stamped the seaweed along the bottom inside the card as well, and then we've stamped off on our pad with the seahorse and then stamped it on here, so it gives the image that he is behind the seaweed, and I just think it's a continuation of the card. then I'm just going to just for quickness just grab some snail. Just make sure you get it right on the edge, and just remember when you put this front panel down, because we're using snail, we've only got one chance. There's no picking it up. Once it's just got to get, you just got to get it right in those corners. Even if you put a bit on your grid paper, it's not going to hurt the grid paper. This grid paper is going in the bin when I finish this tutorial. So I just like to square up my card using the lines on the grid paper. It's a good way to keep it straight. Oops. And just hold the top piece down first, so you get it straight, and then just bring it down slowly, and watch your sides too. That's pretty good. So then that's the technique that I've used on the trifold shutter card. And you could put a little sentiment up here if you wanted to. So I hope you've enjoyed that tutorial. I hope it helps you to know how to do a scene. And just going through the stamp sets I've used was the Turtle came from Land to Sea stamp set. Then the Seaweed and the Seahorse come from By the Tide stamp set. And then we used the little pebbles down the bottom there from the Grunge stamp set. And then we just continued on inside, and I just stamped some seaweed using Cajun Craze colour stamps set, stamp pad, and then I just, using the stamping off method, which you should be used to me using that by now. That's how the seahorse gets that illusion that it's behind the seaweed, and the same on the front. Okay, well, thank you, and I hope that this has helped some of you get to know how I did do the scene on the trifold shutter card.